Welcome to Jive Talk. Good to be here. Good to see you all. Thanks for tuning in to this AMA. I've got lots of questions to get through. I should go for about an hour. As you can see, I'm in a new place. I'm in a secret location in the English countryside with quite marvellous views of this blessed sacred land and the rolling green hills. Very happy to stream from this location. I hope the internet's okay and holds up. If it does, please bear with me. I may have to turn off the camera and just stream with just audio or something, but I'll do what I can to make sure the stream is good. Do let me know if you notice any problems, and I'll see what I can do. And I'll keep an eye on the chat in case you guys have any advice. So, let me go through some of the ones I've already received. Harold Yeoman asks, Dan, this is from the last stream. He said, Lars, I missed this stream. I do have one question which I'd like your opinion on. Do you think that people in the Southern Hemisphere should celebrate things like Yule and Midsummer in the appropriate seasons? As it is, as an Australian or South American is having a winter celebration during a time of extreme heat. Are the seasons more important or merely the traditional time of year brought from the Northern Hemisphere? My personal view is that you should adapt if you live in the Southern Hemisphere to those, if it's in the case of those traditions that are season dependent. So, for example, if they relate to the harvest or something like that, then they should, of course, pertain to the harvest season in your region. So, before I move on to the next question, I just want to say something about. I jumped in the questions a bit quicker about the time we're living in. This is a difficult time for a lot of people. It's very bad. I can see friends like the Golden One had been removed from Instagram. I chose to delete my Twitter because I don't want to be a part of all this anymore. I think that there will be a big, change in the way people use online services in the beginning. There's going to be all kinds of changes that aren't very nice in the coming year. And that everyone should use this time to just remember what's important, because at the end of the day, you have I'm a religious person, and I believe that you need to develop your spiritual life. That's the most important part of life. So even if you've got some problems with work because of all these lockdowns, you might have lost your job, even though there's been mass censorship and oppression from many Western countries, appalling behaviour from the governments in the West, and we're going to see more of that. It's going to get worse. But remember to keep your priorities in order. What are you doing to improve yourself spiritually? Keep the light as your goal always in everything you do. Don't waste time on silly things. Thank you. Carmichael Rose sends $10 for a cider. Thank you. I saw your questions earlier in the chat, Carmichael. I will answer them. So now carrying on then. Here's one from one of my patrons, H. Quinn. You have great music taste. Did you enjoy any new music which came out in 2020? I probably did, but I don't write down. I don't even notice when songs come out. I do listen to the new albums from bands that I like, but I don't pay much attention to, because there's no albums released. I don't buy physical music. I don't really remember which songs came out this year and which came out years ago. But this past year, I was listening to quite a lot of synth as normal. I like comfy synth now. It's a new thing I got into. It's like Grandma's Cottage and stuff like that, which is itself a variant of dungeon synth. And I use a lot of dungeon synth in my scores. Have done since 2013. From Runes to Ruins, there's a lot of dungeon synth on it. And more recently, I started using a lot of music by Borg, who is a dungeon synth artist, whose music also veers into comfy synth. But Grandma's Cottage is considered the pioneer of comfy synth. It's very interesting. I also really like a synth pop or synth something musician called 11 Easton. I've quite enjoyed some of his music recently. Another question from H. Quinn. What were some Indo-European beliefs in when life began for an individual, i.e. at the point of conception? I'm going to give a kind of broad view of Europe here and different varying things, but as I understand it, and I said so in the Tripartite Soul video, the soul begins at conception. I mean, well, obviously not, because the soul has to come into something, but life, our conceptions of life and soul and things like that aren't necessarily corresponding to all the different Indo-European and European traditions in general. But generally speaking, mind is eternal, and the soul, or the constituent parts of the soul, pre-exist the life of the individual being. So in that sense, they precede conception. But I think that they would generally say that life begins with conception, not with birth. Not and if the question was some question about abortion, I would say that they would consider abortion killing, but they don't always consider killing to be immoral. It depends on the situation. Generally it is, but obviously in most traditions, killing one of your kinsmen is associated with something like a karmic debt or something associated with it. So there's that. I got a couple new ones. Let me just get them all. So thank you from Classical Bias. Do you believe in an afterlife and reincarnation? Yes, I do, and that's why I made a video about it. You should watch it. Thank you for that donation. £2. So from the gamer Lycan, should we make a united Indo-European pagan empire? That sounds silly. I don't know what that even is. No. Niels Olof Lev, 100 krona. Thank you very much, Niels. Is questioning the logic, reasons, or the rationality behind ritual and tradition from a materialistic viewpoint detrimental to understanding its true value? You say it takes away the magic. Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously, considering the material background to a ritual has some value if it explains some of the practical, background to what needs to be done to carry out the ritual. For example, like, what is the economic impact of the Ashvamedha on the communities that provide all the animals? That's quite an interesting question. But it doesn't help you understand the meaning of the ritual. So in that sense, it's only a kind of trivial information, really trivia. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt necessarily unless you try and use those to explain the rite, in which case you won't be able to, and you'll come up with a false explanation. Aragon 972 from Poland sends some money. Westuhal, all the best in this new year, Tom. Westuhal to you and everyone watching. It is wassail season. All the people in Devon are wassailing the trees in their orchards this week, and they will probably do it illegally or via Zoom if they can't, because they're not allowed to meet because we're in lockdown in England. But hopefully the trees will be sung to in the ancient tradition. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch my video about wassail and the singing to the apple trees in Devon. And I interviewed people about that in Devon at 2 different orchards. So more questions. MD222, any thoughts on doing a video about Aquam Nepuat, or the fire in the waters deity? I read about that in Jan Puvel's book, and it was quite interesting, but I don't think I'll do a video on that subject, actually. No. Victor Littmark, you like sports? Supporter of any team? No, I don't like professional sports. I like sport as an exercise. Sport for me is exercise and fun. It doesn't make sense to watch professional sports to me. I don't understand the appeal. Dan Davis, fantasy author, says, is the pre-Indo-European mythology of the European farmers detectable in post-Indo-European myth? A lot of people would say it is. And by the way, I just seen you said cannabis is very Indo-European. It looks like the earliest use of cannabis is always associated with some kind of Indo-Europeans. And it's certainly spread around Europe and Asia by Indo-Europeans. The Tarim mummies they had cannabis, and that's over 4,000 years ago or more, and that's some of the earliest type of cannabis. There's hemp, which is not psychoactive, and there's the psychoactive stuff. But the Indo-Europeans are often buried with or have preserved evidence of the use of psychoactive cannabis from the earliest times, and we can see that it's spreading to the different parts of Europe with them. So there's a Bellbeaker burial, a Dutch Bellbeaker burial, which is almost as old, about 4,000 years or more old, and that's got weed in the burial in Holland. So the Dutch have always liked weed for over 4,000 years. So yes, cannabis is very Indo-European. I think that the Middle Easterners didn't have it until Indo-Europeans gave it to them. The Scythians, much later, were still big on their weed and spreading it about, and that's been recorded in Greek source. It's somewhat speculative exactly where it came from originally, whether it was India or Siberia and what happened, but what's certain is that Indo-Europeans are the ones that moved it around everywhere. So anywhere you see weed today, you can thank the Indo-Europeans for that, or not if you hate weed. Viking School gives 100 Norwegian kroner and asks, how similar is Roman and Lithuanian paganism in practice to Norse paganism, ritual structure, and which European pagan religion is best documented? It depends what you mean by documented. The Roman and the Greek religions were very much centered on, well, they were based on an urbanized culture, an advanced urbanized culture with a centralized government. And therefore, they were quite, they'd adapted ancient rural customs that came from Indo-European times or whatever to be suitable for their system of government. Whereas the Lithuanians and the Norse were similar in the sense that they were both much more rural, and they didn't have large cities. They had at best small trading towns. So in that sense, you'll see that the rituals are still very much connected to the farmstead, to the home, and to the elements of nature and the farm. Whereas we get a much more complicated sort of system of temples and government structures in Roman and Greek things. Roman practices are very well documented. Roman mythology is very poorly documented. In fact, a lot of what we know about Roman mythology seems actually to be Greek mythology, where the Romans themselves are using Greek mythology. So, yeah, Lithuanian mythology is poorly documented. Norse mythology is quite well documented in the scheme of Indo-European religions. The best well-documented Indo-European mythology is, of course, Hinduism, and the best in terms of rituals is Hinduism. That's where we've got the most evidence. We have very, very little evidence of Norse ritual, but we have quite a good account of its mythology through a Christian lens. Lithuania, we have very little of the ritual, very little of the mythology. Rome, we have good ritual, but very poor mythology. So it's, it's different. What else have we got? Interesting question from Franz Malicha. Franz Malicha. Were the ancient Germanic pagans syncretic? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. Most pagans were against the foreign religions. They were quite against them. However, we have lots of evidence of different pagan religions merging with other pagan religions, because no matter how conservative you are, even if you're like Japan, they're a very conservative culture and they're very resistant of foreign interference. But look at Japan now compared to Japan 200 years ago. There's been a lot of foreign influence. So even conservative cultures that are skeptical of foreign influence still end up adopting foreign customs over a slower amount of time. So yes, they did. We can see in Celtic religion very clear merging with Roman traditions. With Germanic is less clear, but certainly should have happened. We don't see such a clear, obvious merging of Roman gods with Germanic ones. The Roman Tacitus claims that the cult of Isis existed among the Germans, but that's widely disputed, and there's no evidence of it except that Tacitus says so. So it could be Tacitus got that wrong, or maybe some Germanic people went south to Rome, or came into contact with Romans in Gaul who had themselves adopted the cult of Isis and then adopted it themselves in some way, or maybe not. It's hard to say. Rowdy Rascal gives £5. Thank you very much. And he asks, what is your take on cup and circle carvings that appear widespread, including down the road from my house? Oh, that's fun for you. Well, I rather like the interpretation that the holes, this isn't proven by the way, but it's a popular one. The holes were used they were filled with fat, and then you'd put a little wick in it and light it as a votive offering, so that this to the spirits of that rock, or maybe there was a ritual held in that area, and these holes were used as votive offerings. And I don't think you can have any proper evidence that that's what was done at the time they were made, but you can say that people have been doing that for hundreds of years locally, but those customs of doing that, with using them as lamps, might only be a few hundred years old, whereas the holes themselves are thousands of years old. So I don't know, but that's what I like best, and I think that's quite cool. Weber asks, do pagans believe in one whole truth? Why do all pagans seem to have contradictory views on the same gods that they worship, and what is the authority on the pagan religion? Problem here is that you're assuming that paganism was a religion. It's not. Paganism is a word that was used to describe various different traditions of spiritual practices. It said, I'm a German, therefore I have these gods. Part of being a German would be the Germanic gods, or part of being a Celt would be the Celtic gods. It's not like they chose them. It's not like it was a credo with an authority who ruled on what the gods were, or anything like that. That's why Reconstructionists don't agree on everything, because people didn't agree on everything back then either. That's why there are contradictory views. There are contradictory views in every religion. There are contradictory views in Christianity, even though that does have central authority, because there have been battles over who's the proper authority since the beginning. You had literally bishops causing mass brawls in the streets of Rome back in the 4th century. Who was the right bishop of Rome. This is, before Christianity even constituted 30% of the population of Rome. It was a minority religion. They were still brawling over who was in charge. It's just how things are. The fact is, to say that do pagans believe in one truth? Well, I can say this. Multiple pagan traditions in different parts of the world had elite people. Rabbit Hole sends £20 and says, you are based. Thank you. They had elite people who were committed to what we would call philosophy. And for them, philosophy was not distinct from spiritual tradition and religion. It was all one thing. And I'm talking about things like the Hermetic tradition and the Egyptian origins it derived from. I'm talking about Neoplatonism and the tradition of Plato in the West, and Pythagoras, however you want to say it. And I'm talking about Vedanta in India. All different traditions come to the conclusion that there is one truth and there is one high force above the gods, and that the gods are in some way an intermediary force between that ineffable force, and we properly worship that ineffable force through the gods, and that the ultimate reality is beyond the material reality, and that the highest goal of mankind is to ascend to the divine light of the one, of the truth. That conclusion has been reached multiple times by the wisest people in different societies. That's not to say that every pagan in those societies at the time believed in that concept, that philosophical perspective. But yes, they did. And the idea that Christianity and Islam, these religions that have one truth and one blah, 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 they didn't come up with that. They borrowed it from pop. How heavily forested would the areas around the major stone circles have been when they were first erected? Don't know what you mean by the major stone circles, because we don't know which ones were the most important at the time. We only know which ones we like the best now. Stonehenge is the one everyone talks about, and I have seen a video talking about forestation, how heavily forested the land around Stonehenge was at the time of construction. So I'll answer on that basis. Some people have always said that it was all forest in the land of England before the people came and cut it all down. That's not entirely true. There was a mixed forest and pasture landscape around Stonehenge. That means that it wasn't entirely managed in an agricultural sense, but it wasn't entirely forest either. You'd see small clumps of trees here and there. You'd see large open grasslands for grazing animals. And you'd see also that sometimes something like a barrow would be built in the Bronze Age, and then they'd just immediately leave it to be overgrown with brambles. And then later, when they wanted to reuse it for another ritual, they'd cut all the brambles off and then prepare again the barrow to look nice for another ritual. But it doesn't mean it was constantly maintained at all. As for the stone circles, similar thing. I think the landscape around Stonehenge was quite open, but with some areas of forest. Probably a few more than now, but different. The forests would look a bit different. So no, it wasn't all forest, and I don't think there would be a great many trees anyway. But yeah, hope that answers it. And as for other stone circles, there's so many. I mean, which one are you talking about? Yes, Viking Squirrel, I said thank you for your donation. And you asked about Roman and Lithuanian paganism. What have we got? Yeah, I think I'm only 20 minutes in. I've done quite a lot of questions in 20 minutes. I'm not sure if the connection's cut out and you haven't heard my answers to all of them, but I hope you did, because let me know if you didn't. Survive the Jive. Did your Twitter account get banned? No, as I said at the beginning of the stream, I deleted it. I decided that is not a good platform. I don't want to support it or be a part of it. It's a bad place. I just want to be... I don't want to be contaminated by such, activities. Like, it's not good, I don't think. I want to try and focus my energies in positive areas. Oh, you can see the sunset behind me. Isn't that nice? Yeah, I think it's a very negative place and a lot of wasted energy. So someone says, I will watch later. No, you won't, because I will take this down after the stream. You watch now, or you don't watch it at all. So ask now. You don't support censorship and oppression. I only support censorship of things that are immoral, or things that go against, the real values, of traditional values that are perennial to mankind. I don't mind blasphemy laws, actually, and I can understand why Islamic countries have blasphemy laws. It doesn't seem that oppressive to me. I understand why in Thailand it is illegal to speak against the king. That seems to me reasonable. But I do not understand why in the West people are muzzled from expressing, political opinions that their ancestors have all held for hundreds of years. That is oppressive. Jackson Wright says, hey Jive, I was in your last stream with Sterler. Really interesting streams you have. Sergeant Smug sends £5 and asks, do you think Celtic and Germanic pagan syncretism is a good idea, as I'm considering it, trying it out. Also, I love your channel. Well, I don't know. There probably was some Celtic and Germanic syncretism going on. We don't have a lot of evidence for it. You'd think there would be a lot more, because we know for sure that the Celtic and Germanic... Germany was basically the mixture of Celtic and Germanic, because that was like a heartland for the Celts in the south. And then the northern part of Germany is where the first Germanic people start spilling out of Scandinavia into Germany. So Germany's the first area they start to mix. So a lot of what we consider German and a lot of what we consider Celtic is arguably already syncretic. There's a lot of arguments about this in people, earlier sources. People can't even be sure whether when the Romans are talking about a Celtic or Germanic tribe, they even know the difference. And they do seem to be confused. Tacitus says, he's not clear whether they're speaking a Celtic. He says they have a language like the Britons, but he calls them a Germanic tribe. Well, the Britons didn't have a Germanic language. So that's confusing. Then again, you've got the Anglo-Saxon invasion of England. And surely there was some residual Celtic paganism, a little bit still, or at least Romanized Celtic paganism. Any evidence of syncretism? Not a great deal. Not that we can easily pin it down. There could be, but it's hard to tell. But I think that the one of the clear examples comes from Belgium, I think, with the Matres, and that's also recorded by Bede in the Anglo-Saxons with Modrenit. That does seem to be, we have these three mother figures. That does seem to be something that was found in both Celtic and Germanic cultures, but only those in northwestern Europe. So maybe Celts and Germanic peoples elsewhere didn't have it, so it was just something that they mixed. I don't know exactly what kind of syncretism you're referring to, and I don't know how one goes about practicing Celtic paganism, even though I enjoy reading about Celtic myth. I find it so confusing because there's comparatively the myths are not preserved in a clear way, and interpreting them requires a lot of effort, and I don't know which authorities agree. Like, there are, I know, Druids in the UK and Ireland who, have a clear vision of what Celtic paganism should be. I don't. But talk to those kind of people and ask them about it. I think it's hard enough as it is to establish a proper tradition one way or the other. But I don't condemn it. I don't condemn your attempt at syncretism. But I just warn you not to. That there's a lot of. It's difficult. What you're trying to do is difficult. Why should we say Project Algiz $10? What should we say to those who claim that paganism is dead and that it will never come back? Many Christians and atheists claim that we are foolishly following a dead religion, which is wrong. Well, you by simply existing, you prove them wrong. There's not much of an argument you have to give other than that you exist and you practice the religion. Okay, I'm missing. Tumbo 2060 offers $10. Thank you. Would you consider prayer, sacrifice, to be a kind of magic which draws on divine forces, or as a petition to a divine personality? There is a big debate over whether there is a useful distinction to be made between magic and prayer. I did a big stream with Dr. Boaz, or the Modern Platonist as he's known now, on this channel, and I recommend you watch it. And I try to get to the bottom of that. But basically, there is a big difference, I must say, between trying to change your material circumstances through magic or the petitioning of gods, which can be like a kind of magic, and prayer, which is with the aim of, like theurgy, of achieving a higher state of being. I think that's enough I can say on the matter for now. May 21, Rugian Warlord says, may 2021 be a good year for you and your family. And to you, Rugian Warlord. Thank you very much, my Norwegian friend. Project Algiz. Oh yeah, sorry, I got this one. Adam Winter offers $20. Thank you very much. I was reading Julius Evola recently, and I noticed that he seems to be strongly opposed to modern psychology. I was just wondering what you think about psychology in general, and its legitimacy for finding meaning in life. That which is useful and wise in the discipline of psychology is not new. It's all stuff that has been known for a long, long time, since ancient times. That which is harmful and misleading is new. So I should say that much. That means there are useful things and observances that people have noticed useful things about the way humans are and the way that their childhood experiences shape their behaviors, the way that they interact with others, and how they, how an inner repressed emotion can manifest in an unforeseen behavior. These aren't things that Freud invented. That's not true. You can read ancient writings. People knew this stuff long, long ago. Freud was the one who successfully convinced people that it was a science, but his science isn't even accepted properly by psychologists today. I don't like to speak too ill of psychologists, but I do think that the therapist is best filling in a role that priests used to, or shamans or other kinds of religious authorities. I generally think that people shouldn't waste their money on therapy or psychology when self-improvement should be done religiously. However, there are some people who are far beyond any help that I could give them, and I don't understand how to help people who are severely mentally ill, and I wouldn't attempt to. So maybe the best thing for them is some kind of medical psychiatric care. Probably I think that's about as much as I want to say on the matter right now, but you can see that I wouldn't completely dismiss it, but I think I sympathise with Evola's position that it isn't entirely legitimate, and certainly a lot of it is a racket. Barder sends some money in an unknown currency I don't understand. I am having some technical difficulties watching your stream. Seems like all the best beaters at Silicon Valley are afraid of the Ultra Chad, STJ. Take care, brother, and keep up the great work. I'm sorry about that. It's my fault. I don't think it's the beaters at Silicon Valley. I think it's just that I have very poor connection out here in the sticks. Not much I can do about it. I'm very sorry. Hi Tom, says L Monk with £6 donation. In previous videos you've documented many pagan-derived practices, customs and folklore. Which ones would you like to visit, film in the future? Oh wow, so many. There's so many things in the world I want to do and document. Even in this country there's lots I could do, but if I had an endless budget and I'd love to have a team of, you know, a cameraman, sound engineer and a personal assistant. If I had this kind of money, and I'd fly out to places like, I'd like to document the Mari, some of the customs of the Mari people in Russia. I'd like to go back to Lithuania and look in more detail at some of their practices relating to fire. I'd like to travel to Sardinia and see some of their folk traditions. There's so much stuff I would like to do. I don't know where to begin, but you know, I'll do what I can in future. Rabbit holes. Have you seen Valhalla Rising? If so, what did you make of it? Yes, I have. I was one of the first people to review it. The review is on my blog. I was actually sent an advance copy before the film came out in 2009 to review it by the studio. Have you read Robert Graves' White Goddess? Is it worthwhile? No, I haven't, but I'm going to say no, it's not worthwhile. I don't approve of Robert Graves and all that sort of thing. I've said that before. I'm not a fan of that. You know, it's too wishy-washy, and it's not proper. You're finding it a perplexing read. Well, the thing about that era of scholarship is it's perplexing because it appeals to the sensibilities of the people at the time. I don't really care much for Campbell. I don't really care for Graves. I don't care for these all overarching theories about paganism is this, the golden bow and the white goddess and these kinds of books. There is no overarching explanation for all the myths, and proceeding with the assumption that there is one that needs to be uncovered is wrong. There are explanations for the myths, and you can look at the writings of actual pagans from the time, how they are to be interpreted. People like Sallust, people like Emperor Julian. These kind of people are far more reliable than some Victorian with a pervy view of everything. That's all I'm going to say. Oh, Carmichael Reed, don't forget my earlier questions. Okay, sorry. Carmichael, thank you for that donation. If I want to become a pagan, should I chant to the gods in Anglo-Saxon or modern English? Happy New Year's and wassail. To answer that question, actually I had a massive debate about this with some colleagues of mine. It's hard to say because on the one hand, I think it's important that you understand what you're saying. But on the other, liturgical language does have merit. And this is another thing that the modern Platonist, or Dr. Boaz, and I had discussed, I believe. And I think he may have had a longer discussion on his channel. I can't remember. It was a couple of years ago now that we went through all this. But yes, in Rome, for example, they used prayers in an archaic form of Latin that most people couldn't understand anymore. Sometimes. So that's interesting. Now, likewise, we can see some of the runic carvings are using an archaic form of Norse that wasn't spoken at the time of the carving. So sometimes people, speak in what would be an equivalent for us of speaking in Shakespearean English as a liturgical language. So like a language that's about 500 years older. Speaking in Old English, that's a bit more. That's like going back 1,000 years. And also, I don't think that you can understand Old English unless you've been trained. Whereas I think that the people speaking Latin would understand the archaic Latin that was spoken, so it would be more like speaking in Shakespearean English. Should you use Shakespearean English for your prayers? Don't know. That can sound a bit funny, wouldn't it? So yeah, there's an argument for using an archaic language for your prayers, but I don't think it's necessary all the time. It depends on the prayer. I think in some ritual contexts it helps to set the stage, and to make sure that everyone understands you're using holy language. Dresden Burns says, since you've been practicing ritual invocation, have you had premonitions, visions, dreams, or cues from God's spirits in your mundane life? I don't like to talk too much about that sort of thing, but obviously I have had certain, I have seen signs to guide me in certain directions. That's all I'll say. Opinions on Robert Seffer, asked Taekwondo Chess. He's not my cup of tea. I'm not into alternative history. James SC, £5. If Western society is reduced to a zombie, which other culture or civilization would you most like to see win? I don't think it's... The problem is that all the West... what's wrong with the West is everywhere, so it doesn't make a difference. I've said this before. It's all everywhere. Like, I've travelled everywhere. It's everywhere. This disease is everywhere. It's not just in the West. Where am I now? Do you believe in the perennial worldview? To an extent, I do believe in a perennial worldview. I believe that there is one truth that is expressed in different ways in many religions, but I don't think all religions are equal. I don't think that. Do you personally share any of the religious beliefs of the people you study? Jae Hung asks. Do you yourself practice any non-Christian religious rituals? Yes and yes. I've filmed myself performing pagan rituals and I've uploaded them to this channel. You may search through my old videos and you may see such rituals and you may hear me talking about my beliefs. I am a pagan. Have you read Nietzsche's Birth of a Tragedy? Asks Judge Holden. That is one of the few books by Nietzsche I have not read. Thoughts on the Nietzschean Schopenhauerian conception of Dionysus suffering as man's individuation. I don't have anything to say on that, but I do think that Nietzsche's Dionysian Apollyon dichotomy is useful philosophically, but has only a limited relevance when actually trying to understand ancient Greek religion. Taekwondo Chess, I asked this one already. Do you consider Yankee Apple $10? Do you consider Wotan a benevolent god, or does he pick and choose who he likes, etc.? He's not entirely benevolent. He does have favourites. He is a specific kind of divine personality, which suits a specific type of mortal personality. He's obviously an aristocratic god, and he is a god of an initiation. He teaches an initiatic path. He's rather like Hermes, so that's why Tacitus correctly compared him to Mercury. I've said before, I've also made the case that he is like the Hindu god Brahaspati, as well as like Shiva in some other respects, but Brahaspati is a divine priest. Odin shows us the way. He is the first sacrificer. He performs the original sacrifice. He also makes a sacrifice of himself to learn knowledge. So he is showing us a path of religious behavior that will help us to follow him and to be like him. And not everyone can take that path. Tombo 2060. Tombo 2060. Would you consider... Oh, sorry, I've already had that one. What's going on in this chat? Did I miss anyone? Any advice, Patrick Robinson asks, on where and how one should celebrate an English pagan marriage without just making it all up? And would you ever do a video on marriage? It's a bit tricky because we don't have very good sources on what Anglo-Saxon paganism was like. We have even fewer than we have about the Norse. And we don't actually have a very good account of what a Norse pagan wedding would be like either. But we do know that the Norse had a goddess Vur of wedding vows. She oversees the vows between lovers. So certainly I would say that the vows should be spoken between... in her name, that they will swear on that goddess. I don't know if that goddess has a Western Germanic equivalent among the English. We can speculate as to whether that existed. I'm afraid there's very little that you can do to justify a properly, reconstructionist approach to a pagan English wedding. But there are a lot of things that I did. I knew a place, I went to a sacred place, an ancient barrow, and went to the ritual area of the barrow, and my wife and I said our vows within the sacred ritual area where the sacrifices had been performed, where the archaeology showed, and we made vows to the goddess Vur, to each other. And that was suitable. I considered it an adequate ceremony, but you have to do what you consider to be suitable. 16,000 asks, do you believe in initiatic transformation? And is it possible to become initiated today? How? Where? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think that the main initiatic traditions that remain today are the Hermetic tradition, and there's also some stuff. There's also Buddhism is arguably initiatic to some extent. At least it's a path to awakening of a sort. So there's always that. As for within paganism, there is no fully preserved tradition of ascended masters passing down these traditions, but we can easily see from what sources we have and what we understand how how those traditions resembled other ones that are preserved, such as what we saw of the Neoplatonist initiatic tradition, theurgy. We have all these books, what's preserved in the Hermetic tradition, etc. So yes, I suggest if you wanted to become initiated that you pursue one of those avenues. Sean McConnell asked, are you familiar with the band Wardruna, and do you consider their music an authentic expression of Germanic spiritual music or modern interpretation? Yes, I am. I first heard them probably 10 years ago or so, something like that. God, they've been around a long time, that band, and I think that they are modern interpretation. But I know that they like to use a lot of modern, some of the correct and authentic instruments of that time. And I know that the Einar Sölvik is himself a pagan and that he believes in the gods. So there's that. So in that sense, it's authentic as an expression of Germanic spirituality, in the sense that he is using music as a way to express his religion. It isn't the kind of music that existed back then. Definitely not. But he never makes that claim, and he would never make that claim himself. If you think it is, then you're very much mistaken. It is not the sound of music back then, but it is the same instruments, and the guy has the same religion. Do you own any ancient objects, and would you ascribe any special significance to such objects beyond their historic value? £5 from Mark Ormerod. No, not really. I don't own any very ancient objects, but if I did, I would ascribe a spiritual significance to them. I wish I did. I would like to own a Neolithic stone axe. That would be very useful for the cult of Thor. Saying, what else have we got? A pint from Rockbur. Thank you very much. Carmichael Reese says, Folkish Grim on YouTube. Don't know what you're talking about there, but thank you for that $2. James SC, £10. Did people used to have greater skill in deriving wisdom from limited observations in the past? Has this been lost from people expecting studies with lots of data? How to regain this skill? I don't know. I don't know. Sorry. I'm losing all these super chats I haven't read out. I don't know. Sorry, that's too hard. Classical bias, £5. I saw your video on Kali Yuga and have read about it in religious texts and in Julius Evolar's writings. Do you believe we're living through it? Yes, we definitely are. Do you believe in initiatic transformation? Have I done that one? Yeah. James SC, going back to your question, I think people had, I think people were generally more spiritually perceptive, and that people have lost their ability to perceive divinity in existence now. and that's part of the time we live in. That's just how people are, and it's enhanced by the technological developments that we now depend on. It takes something simple like just spending a little bit of time away from technology can really help to increase our ability to perceive things as they really are. Something about technology just takes you away from it. It's very hard to explain, but I'm sure anyone who's done this, switching off or whatever they call it, unplugging, understands what I'm trying to say. Just make sure you take a walk every now and then. Go outside and make sure you just appreciate things in their natural state and perceive the divinity around you. Oh, Dix. No, I lost the one from someone called. There's one from Dix McSpooner, £5. Did you ever feel foolish practicing your pagan beliefs early? I didn't think it was quite right, and I didn't want to be associated with these kind of people because I thought they were too cringe. But then, as I developed my own practice at home and I became more confident in my faith, I didn't really care if I was cringe or whatever. I thought what's really important isn't being ridiculous. Never be afraid of being ridiculous, because what's worthy of ridicule in the eyes of the masses is often just something that they're not used to yet, and that's because the average person just goes along with whatever is going on around him all the time, doesn't really think about things properly. So there's no good argument just to not do something just because you're afraid of being ridiculous. But I don't feel ridiculous at all in my religion now, even though many probably would still perceive me that way. But that goes away as you become more confident in your faith. You develop proper practice, and you begin to more clearly perceive the signals from the divine in your life. Judge Holden asks, can you explain, $5 he gives, thank you, can you explain the absence of solar gods in Norse religion? Might it be tied to the initiatic nature of the religion? What? Sol is the solar goddess. I even mentioned that in my horse video. She is the solar goddess. The Indo-Europeans didn't have a solar god, they had a solar goddess. Dix Spooner done that one. What's after? Jul Björk. Greetings. Is there a proper Vedic equivalent to Freyr, or is he a god unique to Scandinavia? Freyr only exists in Scandinavia. But even saying something's equivalent, when we say there's an equivalent, it doesn't mean it's the same god. I tried to explain this in the Skyfather video, right? The Skyfather, the original Indo-European gods can be, one god can end up having attributes then descended into different pantheons, multiple gods in one pantheon. And those gods themselves are not then exclusively derived from one god, they can be mixed. So it's very much more complicated than there's an exact correspondence of each god in each pantheon, and then with each of a parent, they each come from the same parent god. It's more like there's the parent pantheon, and then all the gods filter down and mingle together multiple times in different things. So that's why Zeus is both the Skyfather and the storm god, whereas Thor is just the storm god. You see what I mean? So Freyr is a lord, a fertility god. He's, there are fertility gods, and there are lord gods, sovereign gods in all religions. So he has equivalents in every respect, but there's only one Freyr. That's just the Germanic tradition. Book recommendations on Hermetic initiation, traditional Buddhism other than Evola? I'm not very well read on Hermeticism, so I can't really tell you that. Buddhism, I enjoy the writings of Ananda Coomaraswamy, so give him a look. I don't know why you object to the Evola one, but maybe there's something wrong with his interpretation of Hermetic tradition. I know that many people dislike his book on Buddhism, but I found it interesting. Greens Bees, $10. Thank you for all you do for us. Thank you very much for that donation. Um, oh, and also, 1600 asks how to meet others interested. There is a podcast, or there used to be, called the right-wing group of American Buddhists who come from right-wing background, and they will discuss Buddhism. So maybe you should reach out to them if you want to know more about Buddhism. Millennial Woes asks, what's that knocking sound? I don't know. Hello, Woes. I didn't know there was a knocking sound. It might be my chair banging into the table. Sorry about that. I may be mistaken, but you alluded to following a morality that's timeless and in tune with what past generations believed. Do you not find some accepted old rituals particularly brutal, especially ones with rape and such things? That was from Jae Hung. Yes, I do. Some are. And also, I think that some rituals were appropriate at the time and then not in this time. That's not to say that there is a decline in... I mean, that's not to say that we've evolved to a higher state now and that we've gone beyond those brutal rituals. It's rather that we've declined into an age where those rituals can't be effective anymore. That's what a lot of Hindus say. Like, in previous yugas, it might be possible to have animal sacrifice, but it doesn't work anymore. So you shouldn't bother with it. I'm not a Hindu. I'm not saying I exactly believe in the Vedanta thing, but what I'm saying is that the access to animals and the way we live now has changed the meaning of an animal's life. So the value of animal life has changed for us in our culture because of industrial farming, and that has a metaphysical meaning as well, because I could probably get together with a few people, pagans, get the money about, it's not legal, but let's say it was, and we bought a cow and killed it. It wouldn't have the same meaning as a farmer killing his cow 4,000 years ago. So it would have a different meaning. So what we're looking at is the essential truth, what was behind the cow sacrificed 4,000 years ago. And then we're replicating that meaning, not necessarily what these rituals which you describe as brutal. That's what I'm saying that I have. There is a perennial tradition, but it has to be intuited and interpreted in that way. Taekwondo Chests asks, I know there is a symbolism about climbing mountains, heroes raised on the peaks, but are there any sources on Indo-Europeans climbing mountains? Well, the Proto-Indo-Europeans, no, because they lived on the steppe where there are no mountains. So they wouldn't have had any. Or do you mean Indo-Europe? I mean, it's hard to know what some people... I always used to say Proto-Indo-Europeans to refer to the Neolithic peoples on the steppe, and Indo-Europeans to refer to any language speakers of Indo-European languages. But apparently a lot of people prefer to call the Proto-Indo-Europeans Indo-Europeans, which makes it hard for me to understand what people mean sometimes. But obviously any Indo-European language speakers in countries with mountains will have traditions relating to those mountains. For example, in Ireland, there's hills associated with different gods, and there were sacrifices on those hills and things like that. So being high up is associated with the gods. The Himalayas in India are very much associated with their mythology, and the gods go to the mountains and throw them around and have fights and stuff like in the mountains. So the mountains get integrated with it. Why? Millennial Woes says, oh God, now I feel bad. For some reason it's hiding all Woes' comments. He's too naughty. He's not allowed to comment here. Well, we're nearly reaching the end of the stream. Oh, stand fast on high stringer. Gives 10 somethings. Ukrainianism, Heimat, Kurgan, oldest civilization. Best aesthetics, Kiev, Rus, great Christian, semi-military communities. Should all whites embrace Ukrainian ethos? Ukraine better than Europe. What? What? I don't understand. I don't understand what you're talking about. There's some good things from Ukraine. I'd like to visit Ukraine one day. I don't know what... I don't know. Ukraine is a nice country, I'm sure. Smider, not Norwegian kroner 100. Thank you very much. Any thoughts on the evolution of the Germanic languages in pre-Christian versus post-Christian times? What impact did Christianity have on our linguistic frameworks? Oh, it's a bit of a big question. I don't think of it a great deal. As far as I can tell, I mean, it's minor things. I mean, obviously, the earliest written Germanic language is Gothic in the Silver Bible, which is an East Germanic language. So, but that language isn't even, no one even speaks that anymore. So in a way, Christianity helps us to get more. The best thing about Christianity in terms of Germanic languages is that it made literacy a more common thing, and therefore we have more written evidence as soon as they become Christian. But as far as I'm aware, the religion doesn't alter the structure or development of a language very much. You only get a few, terms that have to be brought in to explain Christian philosophical, theological concepts. But most of the time, they're using pre-existing Germanic words to explain those concepts, which leads to some complications. Like the word soul is Germanic, but what did it mean before we used the Christian meaning? The word hell is Germanic, and obviously has a very different meaning in Germanic pagan than in Germanic Christian. So there's just some examples. I'm getting so many donations. Thank you all. James Ross, £20. Really enjoy your videos. Thank you. I've got to keep up on this. Edward the Pale, thank you for your dancing avocado. That's very kind. For 16,000, thanks. I actually love Evola. I just want as much material as I can find. Planning to read Hermetic tradition. I like all his work, but I struggle with detachment as a father. I really like, I say this quite often, the Secret History of Western Esotericism podcast